The storm raged outside, matching the turmoil in her heart. Emily stood by the window, the rain battering against the glass, mirroring the tears that streamed down her face. She clutched the letter in her hand, the words on it searing through her like a branding iron. "I'm sorry, Emily, but I can't do this anymore. It's over." The words echoed in her mind, a cruel twist of fate that she never saw coming. She thought they were forever, that nothing could tear them apart. But now, everything lay shattered around her, just like the broken shards of a mirror reflecting a fractured image of the life she thought she had. She sank to the floor, her sobs mingling with the sound of the storm. How could he do this to her? Didn't he know how much she loved him, how much she had given up for him? She had always been the strong one, the one who held their relationship together through thick and thin. But now, it seemed that even her strength wasn't enough to weather this storm. As she sat there, lost in her pain and confusion, a flicker of determination sparked within her. She wouldn't let this be the end of her story. She wouldn't let him break her completely. Wiping away her tears, she stood up, a steely glint in her eyes. She would face this storm head-on, just like she faced everything else in her life. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She would emerge from this stronger, wiser, and ready to write a new chapter in her story. And maybe, just maybe, the storm would clear, and the sun would shine on her once again. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the vast expanse of the desert. Sarah's heart was heavy as she sat by the campfire, memories of her past flooding her mind. She clenched her fists, the pain of betrayal still raw after all these years. How could he have left her like that, without a word of explanation? A sudden rustling in the bushes startled her, and she gripped the handle of her knife, ready to defend herself. But her tension eased as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a young man, his face hidden by a hood, but there was something familiar about the way he moved. As he drew closer, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. Could it? Slowly he pushed back his hood, revealing a face she thought she would never see again. It was him, Ethan. Sarah's emotions were a jumble of anger, confusion, and a spark of lingering love. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Ethan's eyes bore into hers, searching for something. "I came to find you, Sarah, to explain everything. Please let me." Her heart ached at the sound of her name on his lips. Memories flooded back, the laughter, the shared dreams, the promises made under the starry sky, and then the betrayal, the shattered trust, the emptiness that followed. But looking into his eyes now, Sarah saw something different. Regret, sorrow, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of hope. She hesitated, unsure of how to respond. The fire crackled between them, casting flickering shadows on their faces. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Fine, talk." Ethan sank down beside her, his gaze never leaving hers. And as he began to speak, the walls around Sarah's heart started to crumble. The truth spilled out, raw and unfiltered, begging for forgiveness. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she listened, the weight of years of pain slowly lifting off her shoulders. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying their words away into the vast unknown. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to hope. Hope for healing, for redemption, and for a second chance at love. As they stood facing each other in the pouring rain, emotions crackling in the air like lightning, she felt a mix of anger and sadness welling up inside her. How could he have kept such a huge secret from her for so long? The betrayal cut deep, but the love she had for him still lingered, complicating everything. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, her voice trembling with hurt. He ran a hand through his soaking wet hair, his eyes searching hers for a flicker of understanding. "I wanted to protect you," he said, his voice barely audible over the relentless drumming of raindrops against the pavement. "Protect me from what?" "The truth?" She shot back, her fists clenched at her sides. He took a step forward, closing distance between them, his face pleading for forgiveness. "I was trying to shield you from the pain, from the danger that comes with knowing," he explained, his words a desperate plea for her to see things from his perspective. But she couldn't bring herself to accept his excuse, not after everything they had been through together. The trust that had once been the foundation of their relationship now lay shattered at their feet, broken beyond repair. A gust of wind whipped through the alleyway, tugging at their clothes and leaving them both shivering in the cold. She raised her gaze to meet his, the storm raging within her, mirroring the one that surrounded them. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she admitted, her voice cracking with the weight of her words. He reached out a hand to touch her cheek, but she flinched away, the betrayal still raw and pulsing beneath her skin. "Please," he begged, his eyes pleading with her to give him another chance. "I love you. I never wanted to hurt you." She felt her resolve faltering, the love she still felt for him, fighting a losing battle against the pain of his deception. With a heavy heart, she turned away, her footsteps echoing against the wet pavement as she walked away from the man who had once held her heart in his hands. As the storm raged on outside, Sarah found herself pacing back and forth in the dimly lit living room. Her heart was heavy with worry, and her mind was racing with thoughts of the past. She couldn't shake off the feeling of uncertainty that had been looming over her ever since she received that mysterious letter. Suddenly, the sound of shattering glass echoed through the house, causing Sarah to freeze in her tracks. Her eyes widened in fear as she cautiously made her way towards the source of the noise. She found the shattered picture frame lying on the floor, its contents scattered around like pieces of a broken puzzle. Panic surged through her veins as she realized that the photograph was of her and her long-lost brother, James. Memories of their childhood together flooded her mind, the laughter, the tears, the unbreakable bond they once shared. But now, James was gone, disappeared without a trace years ago. With trembling hands, Sarah gathered the pieces of the photograph, tears streaming down her face. Just then, a powerful gust of wind blew open the front door, revealing a figure standing in the doorway. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she saw a familiar face she thought she would never see again. "James?" she whispered, hardly daring to believe her eyes. The man at the door stepped into the room, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and relief. It was indeed James, her brother, looking older and warier than she remembered. A surge of emotions washed over Sarah as she ran into his arms, holding on to him as if afraid he would vanish into thin air. "Where have you been?" she choked out, her voice filled with years of longing and unanswered questions. James pulled away slightly, his gaze intense as he spoke. "I've been through hell, Sarah, but I'm here now, and I need your help. It's not over yet." Sarah's mind spun with a whirlwind of emotions as James's words sunk in. The storm outside continued to rage on, a reflection of the turmoil that now enveloped her once again. Destiny had brought her brother back to her, but what secrets and challenges lay ahead, she could only imagine. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the quiet town, Lily sat on the porch of her cabin, staring out into the distance. The events of the day ran through her mind like a tumultuous river, and she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in her chest. Just as the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, a sudden noise from the forest startled Lily out of her reverie. She stood up, heart pounding, and strained her ears to listen. There it was again, the sound of footsteps, steady and deliberate, coming closer. Her instincts screamed at her to run inside and lock the door, but something held her back. Curiosity mingled with fear as she took a tentative step towards the edge of the forest. Moonlight filtered through the trees, casting eerie patterns on the forest floor. Then, out of the shadows, emerged a figure, tall and cloaked in darkness. Lily's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the piercing blue eyes and the scar across his cheek. It was Ethan, the mysterious stranger who had saved her from the river just days before. "What are you doing here?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper, a mix of fear and fascination. Ethan's gaze held hers, intense and searching. "I had to see you again," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I couldn't stay away." Lily's heart raced as conflicting emotions swirled within her. She knew she should be wary of this stranger, should heed the warnings of the townspeople who whispered of his dark past. But there was something in his eyes, something that tugged at her soul and ignited a spark of longing. Without a word, Ethan closed the distance between them, his hand reaching out to brush against her cheek. Lily's breath caught as electricity shot through her veins, a connection sparking to life between them. In that moment, she felt a whirlwind of emotions, fear and desire, uncertainty and longing, colliding within her like a storm. And as Ethan's lips met hers in a tender yet fierce kiss, the world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in a dance of passion and mystery under the watchful gaze of the moon. As the storm raged on outside, Ella sat by the fireplace with her heart heavy with worry. Her husband, James, had not returned home from his fishing trip. The wind howled like a banshee, and rain lashed against the windows with a relentless fury. Despite the warmth of the fire, Ella felt a shiver run down her spine. She tried to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled in her chest, but it only grew stronger with each passing minute. Where was James? Why hadn't he come back yet? Just as she was about to give in to her fears and call for help, a loud knock sounded on the door. Ella's heart leaped into her throat as she rushed to open it, praying it was James. But instead, standing on her doorstep was a stranger, drenched and weary from the storm. "Please, you have to help me," the stranger pleaded, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. "My boat capsized, and I've been stranded out there for hours. I saw your light, and I couldn't make it back on my own." Ella's heart went out to the man, his face etched with fear and exhaustion. Without a second thought, she ushered him inside, wrapping a blanket around his shivering form. She offered him a seat by the fire, silently thanking whatever force had guided him to her doorstep on this stormy night. As the stranger recounted his harrowing tale of survival on the unforgiving sea, Ella's mind raced with worry for James. Where could he be? Was he out there, fighting for his life in the raging storm? Guilt gnawed at her insides for even entertaining the thought of moving on from him. But as she looked into the eyes of the stranger, gratitude shining through the exhaustion, she knew she had done the right thing. She had extended a hand of kindness and saved a life in the process. And maybe, just maybe, there was still hope that James would come back to her, safe and sound. As she stood on the edge of the cliff, the wind whipped through her hair, carrying with it a sense of freedom and uncertainty. She clutched the letter in her hand, the words etched onto the paper like a map leading to the truth she had been seeking for so long. Tears welled up in her eyes as memories flooded her mind. Memories of love lost, of betrayal, of shattered dreams. But she refused to let them hold her back any longer. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes and let herself fall backward, the rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins. For a moment, she felt weightless, as if all her burdens had been lifted off her shoulders. And then she felt it, the sharp pull of gravity, the ground rushing towards her at an alarming speed. Fear gripped her heart, but she refused to open her eyes. She had made her choice, and she was going to see it through. As the ground approached closer and closer, she braced herself for impact, for the end. But instead of feeling the hard earth beneath her, she felt something else. Strong arms wrapping around her, pulling her close. Confused, she opened her eyes to find herself enveloped in the embrace of a familiar face, the one she had been searching for all along. "You came back for me," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and gratitude. "I never left," he replied, his eyes holding a mixture of pain and love. "I've been waiting for you to see the truth, to see that I would never betray you." She felt a rush of emotions, relief, joy, but also shame for doubting him. This was the twist she had never expected, the turn of events that changed everything she thought she knew. "I'm sorry," she murmured, burying her face in his chest as tears streamed down her cheeks. "I should have trusted you." His arms tightened around her, offering comfort and forgiveness. "It's okay. We can start over, rebuild what we had, together." And in that moment, as they stood on the edge of the cliff, their hearts entwined once again. She knew that this was not the end of their story, but a new beginning filled with hope and redemption. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a crimson glow over the rugged cliffs and churning ocean below, Sarah stood at the edge, her heart heavy with uncertainty. She had come to this isolated seaside cliff to find solace, but instead she found herself grappling with a decision that could change the course of her life. The wind whipped through her hair, carrying with it the faint scent of salt and adventure. The crashing waves below seemed to beckon her, promising freedom and escape from the burdens that weighed her down. But as Sarah's eyes scanned the horizon, a distant figure caught her attention. A lone man stood on the beach, his silhouette stark against the fading light. It was James, the man she had loved and lost, the one who had shattered her heart with his betrayal. Her pulse quickened as she watched him, unsure of what to do. Should she confront him, demand answers, or walk away and leave the past behind? Her mind raced with conflicting emotions, but deep down she knew that she needed closure. Summoning all her courage, Sarah made her way down the treacherous path to the beach below. Each step seemed to echo the pounding of her heart, the tension building with every moment that brought her closer to James. Finally, she stood before him, the roar of the waves drowning out the world around them. James turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Years had passed since they had last seen each other, but the pain of their parting was still raw. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the crashing of the waves, "I never thought I'd see you again." Her eyes locked with his, searching for the truth in his gaze. "Why are you here, James? What do you want from me after all this time?" He hesitated, a flicker of regret crossing his features. "I came here to apologize, to explain. I never meant to hurt you, Sarah. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, and I've regretted it every day since." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, a mix of anger and longing swirling within her. She had spent years trying to forget him, to move on from the pain he had caused. But as she stood there, face to face with the man she had once loved with all her heart, she felt a glimmer of something she thought long lost. Hope. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the vast open field where they had decided to have their final showdown. Emotions were running high as they stood facing each other, their eyes locked in a battle of wills. "You think you can defeat me?" he sneered, his voice laced with arrogance. She remained silent, her expression stoic yet determined. She knew that this was a fight she couldn't afford to lose. As the wind whipped through the field, their movements were like a well-choreographed dance of death. They circled each other, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Suddenly, without warning, he lunged towards her with speed and precision, his blade slicing through the air. But she was ready. With lightning-fast reflexes, she blocked his attack and countered with a fierce blow of her own. The clash of steel echoed through the field as they continued their deadly dance, each strike fueled by years of training and a deep-rooted desire to emerge victorious. As they fought, memories flashed before her eyes, of happier times, of laughter and love. But she pushed them aside, focusing on the present moment, on the battle that would determine the course of their fates. With each strike, the tension between them grew, the air crackling with a raw energy that threatened to consume them both. And then, in a split second that felt like an eternity, she saw her opening. With a primal scream that echoed through the field, she unleashed a devastating attack that caught him off guard. The force of her blow sent him staggering back, his eyes widening in disbelief. As he fell to his knees defeated, she stood over him, her chest heaving with exertion. But instead of triumph, she felt a deep sense of sadness wash over her. She had won, but at what cost? Their eyes met one last time, a silent exchange of emotions and unspoken words. And in that moment, she knew that their battle was not just about defeating an enemy. It was about finding redemption, about letting go of past grievances and forging a new path forward. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a veil of darkness over the field, she extended a hand to him. And in that simple gesture, she offered not just forgiveness, but a chance for them both to start anew. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the valley, Sophia stood at the edge of the cliff, the wind tugging at her hair and the fabric of her dress. She gazed out at the vast expanse of land before her, the memories of the last few months flashing through her mind like a film reel. She had come to this place seeking solace and closure, hoping to find answers to the questions that had plagued her for so long. And now, as she stood on the brink of a new beginning, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. With a deep breath, Sophia closed her eyes and took a step forward, letting herself fall into the unknown. The wind rushed past her, lifting her hair and sending a sense of weightlessness through her body. But just as she began to embrace the freedom of the fall, a strong hand closed around her wrist, pulling her back from the edge. Startled, Sophia opened her eyes to find Alex standing before her, his expression a mix of concern and determination. "What are you doing, Sophia?" he asked, his voice firm but gentle. I don't know," she stammered, unsure of how to explain the overwhelming emotions that had driven her to that moment. "You don't have to do this alone," Alex said, his grip on her wrist firm but reassuring. "I'm here for you, no matter what." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as she looked into the eyes of the man who had stood by her side through every trial and tribulation, who had shown her what true love and strength looked like. In that moment, she realized that she didn't need to face her demons alone. She had Alex, and together they could conquer anything. With a nod, Sophia allowed herself to be pulled back from the edge into the safety of Alex's arms. And as they stood there, wrapped in each other's embrace, watching the sunset on the horizon, Sophia knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, as long as they faced them together, they would emerge stronger and more resilient than ever before.